A wealthy businessman shortened his business trip and returned home early. When he arrived, he was shocked to find his wife swimming and playing with another man in the pool. Instead of confronting them, he quietly slipped into the bedroom. Seeing the room in disarray, he was filled with rage. But instead of confronting his wife, he carefully planned his revenge. That evening, when his wife came home, she was surprised to see him. She asked why he was back early when he had said he wouldn't return until next week. The businessman didn't answer. Instead, he hugged her and whispered some sweet words. As she turned around, he immediately raised his gun and shot her without hesitation. The gardener, hearing the gunshots, rushed to the door to see what was going on. The businessman quickly turned and fired 3 shots at the window, scaring the gardener into running away. The businessman then moved his wife's body to another location, picked up the spent shells from the floor, cleaned them, and threw them back in place. He then took off his blood-stained clothes, threw them into the fire, and washed the blood off his body. After all that, he didn't leave. Instead, he waited for the police to arrive. More specifically, he was waiting for one person. Sure enough, the police arrived soon after. The businessman requested that a police officer named Nick be allowed to come in for negotiations. At that moment, Nick was completely confused. After all, he wasn't a negotiator and didn't recognize the businessman. To ensure smooth communication, both sides agreed to lower their weapons. What Nick didn't know was that he was the man who had an affair with the businessman's wife, and he had no idea who the businessman even was. When Nick looked around the room and saw a photo on the wall, he instantly realized who the woman was. He rushed over and found that she was still breathing. Just then, the businessman raised his gun, and Nick felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly knocked the gun out of the businessman's hand and tackled him to the ground. Officers who had been waiting outside rushed in and successfully subdued the suspect, while they immediately began giving medical attention to the businessman's wife. She was soon rushed to the hospital. Nick's eyes burned with hatred, while the businessman sat in the police car with a strange smile, as though everything was going exactly according to his plan. The police collected enough evidence from the scene, and Nick vowed to make sure the businessman paid. He went to the prosecutor in charge of the case, handed over the businessman's confession, and recounted the events once more. The prosecutor reassured him not to worry, saying his conviction rate was 97%. The next day, the prosecutor began preparing the paperwork, confident that the case was closed. He signed the confession, and everyone thought this was just a formality. The preliminary hearing was quickly scheduled, but what the businessman did next stunned everyone in the courtroom. He requested to waive his right to legal representation. Despite the judge's friendly reminder, he insisted on defending himself. The judge had no choice but to respect his decision. The businessman then asked to waive the preliminary hearing and go straight to trial. Though the prosecutor was curious, he still felt confident. After all, the case seemed already settled. The hearing was just a formality. However, a phone call that evening left the prosecutor in shock. The police had analyzed the gun found at the scene and found no fingerprints from the businessman on it. Even stranger, there were no signs the gun had been fired. The prosecutor wasn't shaken by this, believing it was all part of the killer's plan. He was sure the murder weapon was still at the scene. The next day, he returned with the police for another search. Apart from 4 missing bullets, they found no new evidence. There were no traces of gunpowder residue on the businessman's hands, and his clothes were clean. Other than the spent shells on the floor, there was no sign of any bullets. Clearly, the businessman was smarter than they were, but the prosecutor still wasn't worried. He knew he had one key piece of evidence left: